Welcome back to Eurosport's live flag-to-flag coverage of the USA Grand Prix. For those of you listening in German and Dutch, I'm going to hand you over now to your commentators. The Germans, my friends Connie Konzak and Gunther Schaefer. And in Holland, it's Bert Davis. Well...
The rain is in the air somewhere. Whether we'll have it during the next 2 hours, I can guess at. But we saw something happen yesterday in Phoenix, which I didn't expect, and that was the entire day was saturated. The racetrack was wet from the last night. So that's one factor we can't predict. But really, the other factor I feel is really the key to this race is that there is no pre-season testing at Phoenix. It's a street track, so no one has got any advantage. And I think that, in fact, will help the weaker teams, the smaller teams, as opposed to the very strong teams, the McLarens, the Williams, the Ferraris.
What about this situation where some of the big names like Nigel Mansell are way back on the grid? Are we going to have people charging through early on in the race?
I would imagine Nigel Mansell, assuming they've got their problems sorted out, and I don't know if they're totally confident that they have, but I'm sure that Mansell is the one man who is capable of starting 17th in the grid in this race and finishing first at the end of the race.
Well, John, what I'd like to do now is check on those top 10 qualifiers, the time set on Friday, of course, and that grid has a very unusual looking lineup. Just coming up in a moment, and if you remember, pole position for the first time since Silverstone in 1988, Gerhard Berger, his 5th ever pole in his first drive for McLaren Honda. On the front row for the first time in his career, the first time for a Minardi car, Pierluigi Martini. 3rd fastest qualifier. Big surprise, Andrea De Cesaris in the Dallara, but he crashed in the morning warm-up, but I understand that car will start. 4th, the talented young Frenchman Jean Alesi in the new-look Tyrrell. In 5th spot, hampered by a misfire, Ayrton Senna for McLaren. 6th fastest, settling in very well with Benetton Ford. 3 times world champion Nelson Piquet. Starting 7th in his debut with Ferrari. Champion Alain Prost, last year's winner here. A big surprise in 8th place, the Osella of the man from the south of France, Oliver Griard. 9th for Williams Renault, Belgians Thierry Boutsen. And completing the top 10, the Italian Stefano Modena for Brabham. 5 Pirelli and 5 Goodyear runners in the top 10, and amazingly 4 cars relying on the Cosworth Ford engine designed 23 years ago, John.
Well, that just goes to prove that today, with all the high tech that we have in Formula One motor racing, that a good set of tyres can offset all those, well, just incredible engines that Honda, Williams and Ferrari are producing. One set of good sticky tyres on cool conditions. Lacey was quickest on the on-time session on Friday morning. That's no surprise, but it's a great opportunity for these cars, the Pirelli car tyres, which generally are on the teams that are not considered to be the front-running teams, the teams that are most likely to win.
Well, this morning we had a 30-minute morning warm-up session. That's always a very significant session, and that saw Senna fastest and Mansell take a trip into the wall. And those top 12 times were Senna quickest at 1 minute 30.456, Alesi on full tanks and soft Pirellis on 1 minute 30.985, 3rd fastest Berger 1 minute 31. At 1 minute 32.072. 5th was Prost on 1:32.116. 6th, Patrese on 1:32.245. The Williams seem to have some problems. Then it was Martini, Modena, Nakajima, Warwick, Griard and Mansell 12th after that brush with the wall. John.
Yes, Nigel, I think, kissed the wall somewhere during the morning session. We saw him coming into the pits with the right rear tyre very deflated. Ferrari really have had a most awful weekend, of course, weather compounding that situation yesterday. They were brilliant in testing in Estoril 2 weeks ago, and they're so confident here on Thursday morning at a press conference, and I've never ever seen Nigel Mansell so buoyant, so positive, and so looking forward to the start of a Grand Prix season.
Yes, he was certainly very bouncy, but then it appears that the Ferrari gearbox is starting to give those old problems again.
Well, they've had gremlins. Nigel sort of is guarded about what he says because, of course, being a Ferrari driver, it's a very political position to be in. So you can never be seen to blame your equipment. You always have to say, well, electrical faults are the fault of a driver, not the mechanics or the electrics in the car. But they've had problems. I'm not confident they've rectified them to the satisfaction of the team. And really, this race is going to be a lottery. What a great start to the 1990 season and the decade.
And the decade, as you say. Another big surprise to me, of course, is this Italian Martini and the Minardi. That's a big surprise. And now you're just looking at the circuit, John, and we've had some superb race cam pictures we've seen in qualifying. The technology seems to have improved over last year. And here we are joining Riccardo Patrese and his Williams, and you see it actually tracing out round the circuit. Lots of right angle bends on this course.
On back onto Jefferson Street, one of the longest parts, one of the fastest parts of the circuit, though this is the end of Jefferson Street. And now he's turning into 5th Street, which is one of these shorter straights. All these corners are second, maybe third gear corners.
And just see our hotel, John, on the right there.
Yes, well, I'm not very pleased about that. But now he's turning back again into Monroe Street, short squirt back into second, third gear, turning back into 3rd Street, under the flyover, coming up onto what is then the second fastest part of the circuit, Washington Street, where the cars will probably reach about 165 miles an hour, getting into 6th gear. You can see the brake marking signs coming up just above us, then turning again right into 3rd Avenue. We've gone from streets to avenues. Again, a short burst in second, third gear, then left into Adams Street, another short burst, then left again into 5th Avenue. Not like the 5th Avenue I'm familiar with in New York, Andrew, is it?
No, not quite.
And then we're back again into Washington Street again for a short burst before the loop that brings us back onto the start-finish straight, Jefferson Street. And that really goes across, I think, what was probably somebody's building at one stage. And here we are, coming up to the start-finish, crossing the line just now.
Yes, this race is going to run 72 laps, not as published. The race has been shortened after a stewards meeting. So there'll be 72 laps of this 2.36 mile, 3.798 kilometre circuit. That's a total distance of 169.92 miles. And for those of you in metric, 273.456. It's going to be a long way around here, though. We expect the race to run close up to the maximum of 2 hours.
One of the things, Andrew, I think is going to be a lot more comfortable for the drivers today is that the ambient temperature is very, very much lower than what we had here in June last year when the first Phoenix Grand Prix was held. Then was well in excess of 100, but today I would have thought if it's even in the middle 60s, that's going to be the highest we're going to see today. So for the drivers, it's a lot more comfortable. And of course, for the tyres, for the engines, for the mechanics, the reliability, one can expect to see a higher finishing rate than the 9 cars from last year.
Well, there's the man who is on pole position. You're looking into the eyes of the man from Virgil, Gerhard Berger. Gerhard, delighted to be on the pole. Hasn't felt very well, actually, earlier in the week, and turned up at one press conference, having had taken a sleeping pill by mistake. Let's look at this lineup of cars. Berger and Martini on the front row of the grid, as we told you. Then the unusual sight of Andrea De Cesaris in the Dallara and Jean Alesi in the Tyrrell Ford. On row 3, it's Ayrton Senna, the man from Sao Paulo, and another Brazilian, Nelson Piquet from Brasilia in the Benetton Ford. On row 4, it's Alain Prost in the Ferrari, making his debut with Oliver Griard, the highest of Nacella's ever been on a grid. Row 5, Thierry Boutsen in the Williams and Stefano Modena in the Brabham team, which has been saved by the Middlebridge organisation. Row 6, Nakajima in the Tyrrell Ford and Riccardo Patrese in the seconds of the Williams. On row 7, it's Nicola Larini in the Ligier and Paolo Barilla, the Pastor heir, in only his second Grand Prix. On row 8, Eric Bernard, another Frenchman, and Roberto Moreno in the Eurobrun Judd. On row 9, way back there, Nigel Mansell in his Ferrari, and the second Japanese in the race, Aguri Suzuki, only his second Grand Prix. Only the second Grand Prix for Martin Donnelly, and Bernd Schneider, he's standing in for Alex Caffey in the Arrows team. Then there's Michele Alboreto and Alessandro Nannini on row 12. On row 12, from Switzerland, Gregor Wojtek and Derek Warwick from Jersey. On the back row of the grid, the two marches, Mauricio Gugelmin and Ivan Capelli, and that team is finding that their cars are just like ice, driving on ice. Well, there's Gerhard Berger, a little wink from Gerhard. You thought, John, when you saw Gerhard at the press conference, that he was a man who has really got the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, but it does appear it was this sleeping pill that he'd taken by mistake. And meanwhile, we're looking into Jean Alesi's car and the new colour scheme of the Tyrrell. What about Gerhard's chances in this race?
Well, I think Gerhard's got the best chance to win his first Grand Prix in a new team, I think probably even better than he might have hoped for. When we saw him at the press conference, I know Gerhard for a long time, and the guy is a fun-loving guy. He's a great practical joker. He doesn't quite like the jokes being played back at him, I must say. But he is a person full of fun and vitality, and he looked not particularly happy with his lot.
1 minute to go. 1 minute before the warm-up lap, and Jean-Marie Balestre there, the controversial president of FISA, tapping the official on the shoulder.
Andrew, that's a $10,000 fine for bringing the sport into disrepute. You realise that you are not allowed to criticise the president of FISA.
I wasn't criticising John, I just said he was directing operations. There is Jean Lacey on the number 4 car with a new Japanese sponsorship over it. That team has a special relationship now on the marketing side with McLaren. That's quite a unusual situation, and one that we've never seen in motor racing before. 2 teams combining on the marketing side.
I think the restructuring that's gone on in the Tyrrell team over the winter time is absolutely incredible. The team is a totally rejuvenated team. They've brought in new people, they've got new sponsors, they've got the association with McLaren, they've got Jean Lacey, who is undoubtedly the star of tomorrow, if not going to be a star even in this very race today. So Tyrrell team, I think, was a team we've got to have a very close watch on during this race.
Tyrrell team, of course, will be using Honda engines next year. A very special welcome to all the people that work for the teams back at base. A lot of people put an amazing amount of man hours in cars, and about 30 race mechanics. A lot of teams have as many as 120 other people back at base, and I know that all the Williams members are at their conference centre watching us live on Eurosport. So to the people at Williams, hello there. Sheridan Finn sends his regards.
You know, one thing about all these people sitting back at home and watching, there's an enormous, and poor Martin Donnelly had a problem in practice this morning. His car, the engine was giving trouble, it wouldn't start, and in fact they thought it might have momentarily seized, and it seems on the air starter, the team are pushing it, and I think that might be the end of Martin's race. It's a great shame, because he was quickest in the wet time session yesterday afternoon, and now his race looks like it's even over before it began.
If he gets it going, of course, he'll have to start at the back of the grid. He can't take up his original position. Martin Donnelly hoping to start his second ever Grand Prix. Remember, he deputised for Derek Warwick in France last year, driving for Arrows, and this doesn't look good for Martin at all.
No, I think Martin's, if they can get that car started at all, it's going to have to be done from the pit lane, and of course he will join the race after the red light goes to green. But I would have said that the prospect of that car starting and joining the Grand Prix is not looking very good right at this stage.
Those Lamborghini engines, the Lotus team have found out, use an awful lot of oil, or actually need a lot of oil to keep them working well.
Yes, they're an engine that seems to require a large reserve of oil, and they haven't really, Lotus have not really got to terms with the engine, its characteristics, and unfortunately they're having to learn at the very first Grand Prix.
We've seen that weaving a lot before, getting the heat into the tyres. What about tyres, John? Are we going to see any pit stops in this race?
Well, all the Goodyear runners are running on their C compound tyre, and they're anticipating that tyre will be man enough to see the car through the race without a pit stop. The Pirelli runners are all running on their middle compound, and they're anticipating they all can go through, but they're not totally confident. If they have to make a pit stop, they will come in and they will fit their even softer race compound at the disadvantage of having to make a pit stop in the first place.
Well, John, just before the start, we'll take a quick commercial break. Stay with us on Eurosport. Okay, well, they're weaving around. No commercial break there. We'll be doing one up a little bit later. There's Roberto Moreno. There is the Ferrari. Guri Suzuki going through the field. The 2 Arrows. Nannini, and we see out of the camera on the car. And in fact, it's lucky we're not going to that break, because the race is just about to start. Everyone coming up, taking their positions. Looks as if it's going to be 25 cars, not 26. The cars now, engines revving, drivers, their hearts beating. I don't think you can stop your pulse rate going up at this moment, John, can you?
No, your pulse rate at this stage is running very high. In fact, at one stage, all the drivers had monitors fitted to them, and your heart rate was fluctuating between 150 and 200 beats per minute, and that's pretty high. But once the red light goes to green, that'll drop dramatically. But there'll be peaks and troughs throughout the race, but it's a fairly stressful situation, and everybody really now is looking for those lights to change.
Well, it's going to be a fast run down Jefferson Street. Most of these cars over 600 horsepower. There you see in the inset, the lights, that'll go to red.